you are.
Have fun, take a deep breath.
Give him hell at the end. Good luck to you.
Fight like hell like we do every week. You are the best here.
Brett, be affirmative. You told me to get on. Info. Ready. Ready. Go slow. Green, green, green. Lock it down, lock it down.
I'm destroyed, and I just got drove through like 6 times on the 14th. What the f*** is he thinking? That is the stupidest thing I've seen in my career. Literally.
Everything you described is accurate. Haven't even finished the second stage yet. Half the field's wrecked.
Hell yeah!
11 got it. Proud of you there, Matt. Good job, pal. Thanks, man. Good job all day. Great work, my man. Great work.
Keep putting yourself in position, we'll win our share, right? We got one back today, brother. Good job.
10-4, great job, guys.
And welcome back to Racing in the Draft. My name is Mark, and I appreciate you tuning in this Saturday evening late for tomorrow's Geico, hopefully tomorrow's Geico 500 from Talladega Super Speedway. Weather seems to be lingering in the area. In fact, I've got my phone pulled up with the radar, and it is absolutely pouring in Talladega currently. So hopefully that kind of gets through tonight and tomorrow morning and gets out, and we get a nice clean dry racetrack for tomorrow at about 3 o'clock, so we can get this whole race in on Sunday and not have something funny happen, like only get halfway through a race or butt up to not having enough sunshine because there's no lights at Talladega, because lighting up a 2.66 mile track would be costly. What's up, Lost Profit? Thanks for joining in. Glad you made it. Appreciate you being here. And yeah, hopefully you did good last week. I had an up and down kind of day. I was down, I was up, I was down, I was up. That's pretty normal, but ended up being moderately down, but not too bad. So it was a crazy race. Speaking of last week, let's go and cover last week's race from Texas Motor Speedway, where the Hooters curse is now over, and Chase Elliott's winless streak of 42 races has come to an end. All is right in NASCAR world once again. Hendrick Motorsports wins, Chase Elliott wins. We might as well just go ahead and crown Chase Elliott champion. God, I hope not. I'm kidding. Congrats to Chase Elliott on finally breaking his curse and Hooters' curse streak. But either way, let's take a look at our optimal lineup. And speaking of optimal lineups, one of the guys that watches this channel used to be on quite a bit, but he does a lot of NFL stuff, so I haven't seen him chime in. Maybe he'll chime in tonight. I know he's got family and stuff like that, but I won't call him out completely, but he knows who he is. He sent me a message. He originally had come in tied for first in the Chrome Horn contest, which was I think he was tied with like 3 or 4 other people, but the payday on Chrome Horn is really it's a quite a good profit. After they kind of rearranged the finishing order, I think he ended up tied for second, which still ended up being a really good day for him. So congrats to him. Glad if he got any information from the channel, awesome. If not, either way, it's really good to see people that kind of hang out in our community actually take down a pretty big win. So good on him. Yes, you called Ty Dillon. I mean, I've got a thumbs down on him. And it really shouldn't be for him, other than I wasn't really sure because he hasn't been running full time on whether, and he was running the colleague car, which had not been running that well. So I wasn't really 100% sold on if Ty Dillon was going to get the win. But I'm telling you, looking at where everybody finished and who was finishing in the optimal lineup and just outside the optimal lineup, this turned out to be much closer to almost a super speedway style lineup than a typical mile and a half type lineup. And Kyle Busch actually gets up and finishes in 9th place, and kind of having an actually decent race for Kyle Busch, even though he is actually quite dominant here. But either way, as you can see, Chase Elliott, Tyler Reddick, Brad Keselowski, Kyle Busch, Daniel Suarez, Ty Dillon all being in the optimal lineup. I mean, the optimal lineup starting spots was 23rd. Typically at a mile and a half style type track, it's about 6 spots better than that. It's like 17th or 16 and a half. So for the optimal lineup, starting lineups to be an average of 23rd is a little strange. But Texas is a little strange too. So either way, our optimal lineup challenge after 9 races really clustered up top. Ross Chastain, Ty Gibbs, Noah Gragson, Martin Truex Jr., Bubba Wallace, William Byron, Tyler Reddick, all with 3. And another, 8, 9 drivers at 2. We haven't had anybody kind of break out as a optimal lineup challenge leader. So we will continue this week, and I'm sure we'll probably add a few names because it's Talladega, it's a super speedway, it's a lottery. It's probably the best way to describe Draftkings and super speedway racing, or even super speedway racing in general. If the Xfintiy race is any indication. All right, so last week I kind of really dove deep on practice times and things of that nature to kind of see if what we were seeing in practice was going to end up turning up into the race. And other than Kyle Larson losing a tire because of a pit crew, he absolutely was the most dominant car on track. And if that had not happened, I think we would have had a much different race, and it would have been kind of a snooze fest because he absolutely had the best car. Tyler Reddick was pretty close to him on speed, but I'm not sure with Kyle Larson having the first pit stall, and if they hadn't screwed that up, he would have probably dominated the field. But Chase Elliott starting 24th, his practice laps were mediocre, ends up getting the win. So I don't know how much we can take into, and it's just the first week that I've really kind of taken a deep dive on these practice laps, but I did make some notes over here so I can kind of keep track of what may have happened, kind of what's happening with practice compared to finishing orders and those types of things. And I'm going to start to kind of compile some more information and see if we can kind of pinpoint if there's anything. What's up, family man? Congrats, buddy. I'm not sure if you want me calling you out or not, but congrats on your bag last week. That was quite phenomenal. I didn't end up having a great day, and by getting your information, it definitely put a smile on my face. So I'm super happy that you had a big win last weekend. Hopefully, either myself or somebody else in the chat, maybe Lost Profit or somebody, can pull down a bag this weekend. But Chase Elliott, starting spot was bad. Practice speeds weren't all that great, and ends up getting the win. Now, like I said, Chase Elliott worked his way to the front. He did all the right things. And like I said, this is the first week where I've kind of taken a deep dive into practice notes. And I'm going to kind of keep track of this. And I'm going to try to condense it because this is a lot of information for one screen, and I get it. If you want to go back and pause and kind of read some of my notes and stuff like that, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time because that was last week. And as we get more notes on the tracks that we have practice at, and some viable information, I'll definitely kind of notate it and kind of see if we can find a pattern to the madness. Denny Hamlin was decently, he wasn't even that fast in practice. Now his fall off speed wasn't that bad, and he had a very fast car, and probably if he hadn't gotten the outside spot on Chase Elliott, if he had the inside, I think Denny Hamlin would have been the winner last week. So I'm just letting everybody know that I kind of, I'm looking at running average running positions, practice speeds, fall off speeds, and those types of things. So I told everybody I would kind of share the information as I got it. Not trying to hide anything from anybody. I've always told everybody in this group that I'm going to give you the information if it's something I can back up with data, and then I'll say that. If it's a gut check reaction, I'll tell you, hey, this is nothing but a gut check, and go from there. And kind of over here, it was kind of interesting to see the fall off speeds and the guys that did not have huge fall offs on their. I mean, we really can't call a long run 10 lap, but it was there. It was showing signs of tire wear, at least at that point. Well, pretty much everybody up here finished better than their starting spots because they were able to move through the field. So I think this part of the information seemed to be kind of interesting. The Austin Hill play, they had brake issues, so I do put an asterisk beside that. Before that, though, he had worked his way into the middle of the pack and was running pretty consistent. I think at one point they at a stage break didn't take tires or something along those lines and ended up being somewhere in the top 5. So this part of the information I think is going to be fascinating to kind of keep an eye on. Are the guys with not as much fall off, are they able to work their way through the field and through the pack? So, and guys with the worst fall off still ended up being okay, but they weren't finishing kind of on average of what we're seeing up here, which some of these guys were finishing in the top 10. So we'll kind of see what happens. Family Man, never thought I'd ever win the Chrome Horn. I had 16 points more than the first place and the 100,000 to first. Oh, wow. So you hit in both the Chrome Horn and the Engineer? Or are you just saying you went and looked at the Engineer one? It didn't have the same lineup. I'm just trying to make sure I'm understanding that correctly. So if you hit on both, drinks are on you. But either way, congrats again. All right, so let's kind of get into this. We don't have as much information to talk about this week because there was no practice. It was literally unload, go run a qualifying lap, and park it, and that's where you're going to start. And for some people, they didn't even get to run a qualifying lap. How interesting. Let's see. All right, Talladega Super Speedway. It is the largest oval we run in the Cup Series. The track length is 2.66 miles. There's 33 degrees in the bankings and the turns, which is unbelievably high banked. The race length is 188 laps. Dominator points will not be an issue. Do not worry about Dominator laps. Do not worry about laps led. Do not worry about fast laps. It's here to show you that it's part of the point system, but it's not going to mean a hill of beans. Do not worry about Dominators at all for this weekend. Of course, I say that, and I don't know, who is it? Michael McDowell starting from the pole is going to go out and lead all 188 laps. We won't have any cautions other than stage breaks. And it'll be a snooze fest. Not going to happen either. But I did watch Mark Martin win this race many, many, many years ago. Green flag to checker flag. Not a caution in sight. And no, I didn't hit both. I had like 2 lineups in the Engineers, so I got to see what first place had just compared. Yeah, and I love when I run all the different tournaments and may have differing lineups in different tournaments, but then I almost go, oh, I screwed that up. I'll have one in the Chrome Horn and one in the, I can't remember what the $1.20 max tournament is, but I won't run the same lineups in both. I'm kind of hedging my bets a little bit on the two, and then all of a sudden I'll have a really good finisher in the $1 tournament. And then I'll compare to the chrome horn, I'll be like, oh my gosh, I would have finished 5th or something and won a couple $100. And I'm like, if I just put the different lineups and the different ones, I kind of kick myself when I see that. But it is what it is. Sometimes you hit them and sometimes you don't. And Family Man, you hit it. And you hit it good. Once again, congrats. That's huge. Tracks to compare to, Daytona is probably the one that's closest. Atlanta's a mile and a half, but acts like a super speedway that's beginning to act not like a super speedway. It's going to be interesting to see what Atlanta does over the next couple years. And the way Atlanta has kind of transitioned over the last 3 years with the sun beating down on it, I almost would like to see, and I know I'm going to bite my tongue on this one, I'd like to see Texas kind of do something like that. But we'll see. Yep, I do that all the time. Yeah, it's but sometimes it works out in your favor, and then you're like, oh, I played the right thing. Cool, awesome, great. Yeah, that's the crazy fun part of playing DraftKings and NASCAR. I'm sure you probably see the same thing in the NFL. You know, you'll run a couple different lineups. You'll put one in one tournament, and then you put a different lineup, slightly different in another tournament. You go back and look and be like, oh man, if I had just done that a little bit different. But that's the way we learn. All right, optimal lineups from Talladega last year's 2 races. I mean, here's the key, and I'm even going to show you the Xfinity race today, which I could kick myself because I know not to do what I did today in the Xfinity race. Even though I ended up having an okay day. I mean, I didn't hit for any huge bag or anything, but I pretty much broke even. But if I should have played it the way I know how to play it. But either way, I mean, 36th, 30th, 10th, 34th, 11th, and 23rd starting spots for the fall race. 24th place starting average spot. $5,700 left on the table. No dominators. Fast laps don't matter. They're going to be spread out throughout the entire field. I mean, in laps led, they're only a quarter of a point per lap led. So, I mean, even a Kevin Harvick last fall who led 10 laps or whatever, 11 laps, missed 3 points of his 55. I mean, that might get you, that might be a potentially 1 or 2 spot difference in DraftKings, but it's really not that big of a difference. Then in the spring, I mean, same thing. I mean, other than Ryan Blaney, and Ryan Blaney is just good at Talladega. So, and he's got a very favorable starting spot this weekend for us in DraftKings. But, I mean, 22nd average. You know, we go to a Daytona from earlier this year, 38th, 28th, 29th, 18th, 24th, 20th, 34th. Average starting spot of 28.5 for the Daytona 500 earlier this year. Atlanta, a little bit different. You get some guys that'll start up front, and they also run 260 laps compared to 200 or 188 laps. So you get a few more laps, which gives you some more time to get some more dominator points. Not that dominator points played a huge difference in Atlanta, but you know, you could see the 2 guys that started in the top 10 both had dominator points with laps led, Austin Cindric and Ryan Blaney, and that probably was the difference on them getting into the optimal lineup. So at Atlanta, it plays a little different because of the amount of laps that they run. In the fall Daytona and the fall Atlanta, I mean, once again, nobody in the top 10, barely anybody in the top 20, really. And the fall Daytona race, you know, everybody was outside the top 20 except for 2 guys, and they were teammates, Brad Kay and Chris Buescher. At the end of last year, they were running really, really well. But a 26.2 Daytona. This is the Xfinity race from today. And there was some crashes, but I mean, some of these guys still ended up that started up front, they weren't out of the race by any means. Now, they had damaged cars, so they weren't going to finish in the top 10 necessarily. But, you know, I mean, we've got $15,000 left over for the optimal lineup in the Xfinity race today. I mean, Leland Honeyman, Brandon Poole, Jeb Burton, Mason Massey, who got into the race by sheer luck because Garrett Spitley's hood hatch came undone during his qualifying. Matt DiBenedetto, I mean, okay, good on Matt. We know he knows how to race super speedways. And Cesar Baccarella. But yeah, I mean, so Jesse Love still started outside pole, had the 7th most points, and only had 28 laps led. So not even close to what Leland Honeyman or Massey was 60 and 70 because they started in the back. It's all place differential. So I mean, that's what I always try to hammer home here. And this is kind of the average starting spots for the top 15 in DraftKings points. This is for the Xfinity series. And when we get to this next page, we're going to see something extremely similar. In fact, I think it's even more severe for the Cup Series, that the target is between really 21st and 38th. So we'll get to here. Yeah, I mean, right here, our target's 11 through 20 or 21 through 30, and some guys that are starting 31st or worst. I mean, it's just... I mean, out of the 4 races, we had one person that started on the front row that made the top 15 in points. So it absolutely, we are targeting everyone from 11th place on back. And in fact, I'm really targeting 20th and on back. And like I said, tomorrow's going to be one of those freaky days that nobody decides to wreck, which I'm still waiting for it to happen because it's going to end up happening at some point at Talladega, Daytona, or Atlanta. We're just going to have one of those races that everybody decides to behave and nobody gets into an issue or wreck. Hasn't happened in like 5 or 6 years, but I'm waiting for it to happen. And I changed after kind of looking at the Xfinity race earlier today and kind of being like, God, I really screwed that up. I was kind of like, you know what? I'm not putting enough weight on place differential. So I may have gone and probably put too much weight on place differential for the Cup Series race, but I went really super heavy. I mean, I've got Michael McDowell flat out at 38th, and Kyle Larson, who's starting 30th. Okay, well, Kyle Larson's going to be fast anyways. BJ McLeod, 37th, moves him all the way to 7th in the ranking system. So I have waited, because we have no practice speeds, I have weighted the place differential probably 10 times more than anything else. So we'll kind of see what happens, but yeah. So I've got the orange and yellow out for anybody starting 1 through 10. A lot of orange even still through 11 through 20, and this kind of goes back to how I think and what history has kind of told me that these guys like Harrison Burton seems to always run decent at super speedways and then ends up having an issue. So, you know, that's why he's kind of down here in 32nd on the ranking system. But either way, let's get into these drivers by drivers. There it is. Ryan Blaney, $11,000. Dega is cleaner sometimes than Daytona. I feel like, do you think it's okay to sprinkle top 10 guys in case they finish high? Is it worth the risk? Good question. Tell you what, let's pull this up. This will kind of give you an idea. Go Cup, top 15 DraftKings points. I know this is kind of small. Talladega. So if we look here, let's see if I can make this bigger. Go to 150. Does that help? Okay. Yeah, you can see it. All right. So if we look here at the Talladega Spring race from last year, we've got one. He's in 10th. Okay, so 3 people in the top 15 in points for the spring race last year. The fall race is actually over here. We've got 1. Okay, Kevin Harvick's at 11th. You have an 8, a 12, a 7, and a 6. The 35.2. The Now we look at kind of these other ones. The fall of 2021, we've got 1, 2. I mean, as you can see, I mean, Denny Hamlin from the pole, who even finishes in 7th, is 15th in Draftkings points. The Dega spring race, we've got some guys that are in the teens, but nobody in the top 10. We've got a Kyle Larson who started in 5th, finished in 4th, had 50.8. Martin Truex Jr. started 2nd, finished 5th with 37.35. I mean, you can sprinkle them in, Matt, but I honestly I don't know if it's worth. I mean, Ross Chastain, I guarantee, was more expensive this fall 2022. I guarantee Ross Chastain and Eric Jones were either similarly priced or Ross Chastain was more expensive. And if you easily slipped Eric Jones starting in 12th for somebody who started in 6th, or I mean, a Bubba Wallace at 43. I mean, you lost 9 points. Sure, I get that. And this isn't optimal, so I don't know what the pricing is of this. This is strictly their starting position, their finishing position, how many points they got, and I look at the top 15 and points getters. Hopefully that makes sense to everyone. I know it makes sense in my brain, but sometimes not everything in my brain makes sense to everyone else. So yeah, I mean, and then you say Dega's cleaner than Daytona. That's not necessarily. I mean, it is somewhat the case, but I mean, here's 2 guys in the top 10 at the spring Daytona race. 1 person in the top 10. Nobody in the top 10. I mean, they're so similar. I think the problem is it's not finishing people that finish in the top. People that start in the top 10 finishing in the top 10, I don't think that's the issue. The issue is there's no chance for dominator points because of the speeds. So if we go and look Daytona or Talladega, this is Xfinity. I want to make sure we're looking apples to apples. So here's the Talladega Cup Series. Let's go look so here, I'll blow this up a little bit. So if we're looking here, I mean, fast laps. I mean, everybody's getting fast laps. I mean, Zane Smith had 9 fast laps, and he only ran 141 laps. Austin Hill had 12 fast laps, finished 23rd. Ricky Stenhouse Jr. had 12 fast laps, finished 16th. So, and these are your dominator points, and laps led are spread out everywhere. I mean, you had Ryan Blaney started in 5th, finished in 2nd, had 47 laps led. Let's go take a look at how many points he ended up having. There's something wrong with that. Yeah, that's not right. Something in my formula got messed up. Yeah, it's backwards. But the fall. Okay, this one's right. Here, we can copy this. And go back over here. All right, so he had 59 points. Starting in 5th, going to 2nd. Now let's go back to here. Dega, spring 23. Talladega, spring 23. Yeah, I mean, Ryan Blaney, I mean, yes, he finished 5th, got to 2nd, and got 59 points. And that's probably the best example. I mean, I don't know if the chance of taking somebody in the top 10, even just sprinkling them in, is worth the squeeze. I mean, yeah, you can do it, and yeah, you can get possibly lucky. We had a Ryan Blaney spring of 23 get in there. We had a Ross Chastain get in there. But like I said, these are not optimals because I don't have the pricing in here. So I don't know if this is too expensive. It doesn't appear to be. And most of the time you can kind of run almost any type of lineup at super speedways and get away with it. So hopefully that kind of helps explain my thought process. But it's, potentially a real advantage for us, for a Ryan Blaney, at $11,000. Would you lock Larson since he's guaranteed positive points? Lock? If I'm running 40 lineups, do I lock him into all 40 lineups? No, absolutely not. I don't lock anybody in that much. The other thing is he's going to be on minimum 55% owned. He's probably going to be closer to 65% owned. The thing we don't know about Larson is I'm sure they fired the engine in the garage to make sure the engine started. But we have no idea who knows if the brakes even work correctly on that car. More than likely they do. But I've seen Kyle Larson during COVID era where they literally came unloaded and went racing and they had a shock that was broken. If he's starting 38th and he's got a shock that's broken, he potentially can't even run the race. I wonder if we didn't have practice, was it the weather? I wonder why we didn't have practice. No, they do not do practice at super speedways anymore. They don't do it. They do it at Daytona 500, and that's the only super speedway that they have practice. And it's very shortened, and most of the time, most people don't. Atlanta, they don't have practice. Talladega, they don't have practice. And then the fall Daytona race, they do not have practice. Because it's drafting. They don't. I wish they would give them. I wish they would give everybody the opportunity to go run 2 laps. Just go run 2 laps. Don't run it in a pack. You almost run it like a pseudo qualifying. You go out, run it. Maybe you can tweak a little bit on it, but it's not drafting. It's not anything else. You're not going to be in fear of getting collected and somebody blows a tire during practice and you wreck your primary car. That's the reason why they're doing it, because nobody was using practice because, every lap that they run on these engines is one more lap that they run on these engines. And the engineers that build these engines say, you get X amount of laps on this engine. When you hit that point, we can't guarantee the engine's going to continue to live. Now, the problem is we don't have engine failures anymore. Part of that is because they don't have 4 hours of practice Friday, Saturday, and going into Sunday. And then run a 500-mile race. So there's pros and cons. I would like to see a slight different practice session. I wish they would do, I don't mind the groups, but I would almost like to see the 2 groups run, each get an hour session, but split into 30-minute, 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 30 minutes. So it's a 2-hour session that's split over 2 hours, and then go let them qualify. So that way we get more data. They could also tweak on the car a little bit. But I also believe these cars are running so tight together to begin with that if we give them more practice time, all it's going to do is tighten the field even more and make it more difficult for these cars to pass, because they're all going to be that much more equal in speed. Once again, that brings us back to either more tire wear. I really, really like what Denny Hamlin was laying down the last couple weeks when he says, hey, I don't want to steal stuff from Formula One, but Formula One goes with 3 different tire sets, soft, medium, and a hard, and you get to choose what tire you run. You run a soft tire, cool, you're going to be fast for 10 laps, and then you're going to be sitting ducks. You can run a hard tire, but you're going to be slow. I think that would put in a lot of strategy, and I really like the thought process. So, but let's talk about Dega, because I could go on for days about what NASCAR needs to do and should do. And I agree with Denny on a few things. I agree with Dale Jr. on a couple things. I think if we put all those minds at a table and NASCAR would actually listen, and Goodyear would actually listen, we'd actually have some really, really good racing again. All right. Ryan Blaney starting from 21st, average finish of 9.2, which is almost the best average finish over the last 5 races. Now, the 5 races I'm looking at are all next-gen era races at Talladega, and I threw in the Daytona Spring race from this year. He's got a 9.2 average finish. He's got 1 win, 3 top 5s, 3 top 10s, 4 top 20s. He finished first in the fall race here at Talladega last year. He's got the absolute best average finish for anyone over 10 starts at Talladega with a 12.7, which is really good. And he's coming from 21st. Ton of place differential. So, I mean, along with Kyle Larson, Ryan Blaney are both going to be absolutely extremely heavily owned. We're going to see, we've got some really smart people who do Draftkings, and you can see it in the scorings. You can start to see the patterns. There's a lot of people who've gotten really good. And all of you guys listening here have gotten really good at making your lineups. But it's getting tighter and tighter at the top of the pack. With that being said, the average player that's coming in and running a few lineups, they're going to run Kyle Larson, they're going to run Ryan Blaney, they're going to run Ross Chastain. Those are going to be the 3 highest owned guys. I can just tell you straight out of the gate. Now, the way we win tournaments, now if you want to run a cash lineup, I think putting those 3 in the cash lineup and running, a double or, whatever the cash lineups. I don't run cash tournaments, so I know the double ups and things like that. But I know the ideal way to run those are to the safe plays. A Kyle Larson, a Ryan Blaney, and a Ross Chastain, all 3 are going to be fairly safe bets that are going to be pretty high scoring. So Ryan Blaney is going to be highly owned. I've got him at 30 to 35%, but that could even be, I could be a little underweight on Ryan Blaney, to be honest. He might be very heavily owned. William Byron next in line here at 10,800, starting 13th. Not a ton of place differential here, but I mean, the hottest driver in the next gen era. And if we look at the 5 races total, the 5 races that we're looking at, all the Degas and this year's Daytona, he's got a 7.6 average finish, which is better than Ryan Blaney, who's the best probably at Talladega of everyone. He finished 3rd here at this race last year. His 1 win does come from the Daytona Spring race. But other than that, I mean, all 5 races he's finished in the top 20. I mean, if you start 13th and finish 13th, that's probably not going to be enough to put you in. I mean, it probably puts you in the top 15 in points for DraftKings, but I doubt it gets you the optimal lineup. Now, is it possible if he goes and finishes 3rd again, he is not going to be as heavily owned? I mean, I expect William Byron probably to be in the 10 to 15% range, and that's probably where I'm going to be. I'm probably going to run him. So he's probably not going to be superly heavily owned, especially at his price tag. So a way to differentiate your lineup would be possibly to run a William Byron. Denny Hamlin's another one. Now, Denny Hamlin's really good at super speedways. He's much better at Daytona than he is at Talladega. But he's still really good at drafting tracks. And he's starting 23rd. Ton of place differential here. This is now the 4th guy that is starting 21st or worse that I think could easily be in the top 5. We can't put them all in the top 5, but I mean, Denny Hamlin, Ryan Blaney, Kyle Larson. Now, Kyle Larson sucks at super speedway races. Also remember that. That's why I also don't think Kyle Larson's a dead ringer for putting in a lineup. So you have to remember that part too. Brad Keselowski, another one. Really good at super speedways. Recently, probably not as good. But Talladega is his absolute best track also. Starting 22nd. I mean, you've got 21st, 22nd, 23rd. You've got Denny, Brad, and Ryan. I mean, at this point, how do you start to begin to separate other than running multiple different lineups and differentiate? Brad has the potential of being overlooked with a Ryan Blaney and a Denny Hamlin. And now you can easily see where, we've gone through 5 drivers. You can easily see where William Byron completely gets overlooked. Now, I don't know if there's enough points. And there's not enough points for William to get if it's William Byron first, Brad K in second. Brad K is going to outpoint him. Just sheerly the 9 points that he gets different, he would have to lead, what is that, 36 more laps just to equal Brad's same points. So, and that's really tough at a play track when everybody's trading the lead. And then we got Chase Elliott at $10,000. With all that being said, Chase Elliott's starting 9th. At this point, you're starting too far up. Even in an 8.4 average finish at the 5 races that we're comparing to, most of them being Talladega, it's just there's not enough place differential here for the amount of really good cars that are starting middle to back of the pack. So, you can differentiate and take a Chase Elliott because, sure, let's say something really weird happens and Brad Keselowski and Denny Hamlin wreck on lap 3. They're at full speed at that point, and they take out the entire back half of the field. Now we got a real issue because nobody from that back half is making their way to the front. That it's a weird thing, but those things can happen at these plate tracks. Now all of a sudden the guys that took a William Byron and a Chase Elliott might look okay. So I could see some arguments for playing with a few guys that are kind of further up just in case something really weird happens. But typically we don't see much happen in stage 1 or even in stage 2. We'll see things happen at the end of stage 1, at the end of stage 2, because they're fighting for those playoff points or chase points at the end of a stage. So, once we get green flag racing, I guess there's a potential you have an issue on pit road, but other than that, it's going to be probably clean and green for stage 1 and stage 2. Stage 3 is the one that gets all chaotic, and we saw that in the Xfinity Series race today. Joey Logano, $9,800 starting in 7th. Look at Joey in the last 5 plate races that we're comparing to. 29.2 average finish and finished 25th in this race last fall. Ooh-wee. I'm not even sure I have 5 to 10% once it's all said and done. It probably is going to end up being less. I don't, starting 7th is just too far up. I just don't know how to justify for myself, much less tell anybody else, oh yeah, you should take Joey Logano. He's going to be really good. If you want to go and place a bet for Joey Logano straight up to finish top 10 or top 5, that's a little bit safer bet than putting him in your Draftkings lineup. Because betting is completely different than running Draftkings. They're way different. So Joey Logano and Draftkings, yeah, not interested. Do I think he has a potential decent day? Maybe. But, there's just not enough points out there for me to take him in a lineup. Kyle Busch, 9,500. Hey, good on Kyle Busch for starting in 4th. His teammates starting right next to him in 5th, Austin Dillon, who ended up having a decent day last week, finally. Maybe Austin Dillon has started to turn the corner and get rid of that unlucky horseshoe he had. But I don't be interested in Kyle Busch starting, especially, and Kyle won this race last spring, but then he goes and finishes 26th. Starting 4th, finishing 1st, it puts you in the top 15 in points, but it doesn't put you in the optimal lineup. So 0 to 5%. Bubba Wallace may probably get some ownership. He's usually pretty good at super speedway races. Lately, not as good as he used to be. Seems to be a little bit worse since he's kind of been gotten over to 2311. But starting 14th, he's got an 18th place average finish for the 5 races we're comparing to. Here at Talladega, even with 1 win, he's got a 16.8 average finish. there's a little bit of room here for place differential, so I got a little bit of usage. Um, you know, Kyle Larson hasn't even turned a lap yet. Barely fired the engine. Starting 38th with an asterisk. Now this is he has started to slightly improve at super speedways. He's actually getting a chance to finish, but starting 38th, you got to miss a lot of stuff. And there's a lot of these guys that are much cheaper that are used to running in the back and staying in the back and staying out of everybody's way, and that's why they get good place differential, because eventually everybody's going to wreck. They're going to be a quarter of a lap behind it, and they all slow up. They don't wreck each other, and they move up 15 spots every time that happens. And the next thing you know, BJ McLeod starts in 37th, and after 3 big wrecks, he's running 10th. And that's how he does it. So Kyle Larson starting 38th. Yeah, I mean, he's got the most to gain out of anybody, but he's got a long way to go, and he's got to just be patient. He's got to just hang out with Cody Ware and BJ McLeod and Carson Hocevar and just cruise through the first 2 stages. And that's going to be really hard for a guy like Kyle Larson, who wants to run and wants to get up front. But he's going. Everybody in here is like, "Oh, Kyle Larson's a plug and play," and yeah, I get it. He's going to probably be 50% of my lineups, because if you don't have him and he finishes 5th, he absolutely will have the most points of anybody on the board. How could you not have him? You won't make the optimal lineup if you don't have him. But everybody else is going to have him too. The question is, who are you going to differentiate your lineups with Kyle Larson, with Ryan Blaney? It's, and it's going to be the Cody Ware, the BJ McLeod, the Ty Dillon. And I don't think Ty Dillon's running this race, but it's going to be one of these guys that's $5,200, $5,400, $5,800. That's where the lottery comes in. Sure, it's easy to say Ross Chastain starting in 32nd, who, by the way, last fall started in 32nd, and guess where he finished? 38th. Coming to stage 1, wrecked. He was out, finished last. So just because they're starting in the back doesn't mean they're going to have a good day. And he did lose points. Now Kyle Larson cannot lose points, because 38th pays you, I think, 2 points or 3 points, if I remember correctly. But yeah, Ross Chastain starting in 32nd, same place he started last fall. More than likely, he's not going to make the same mistake. More than likely. Now, does somebody make a mistake in front of him and he has no choice but wreck? I don't know. That's the fun part about this race. We just don't know what's going to happen. But he's going to be super heavily owned. We now have Brad Keselowski, Ryan Blaney, Denny Hamlin, Ross Chastain, and Kyle Larson. Literally 5 of probably the top 12 drivers in Cup Series, all starting 21st or worse. Okay. now we got to figure out, who do we put in with them? And there's 32 other guys to choose from. And I'm not saying those are the 5 that you need to put into a lineup. I'm not sure you can fit all 5 into a lineup. And I know most of the time on super speedways, you can fit almost any lineup you want within reason. I don't know. Can you even put that into a lineup? Let's see. Can I even put that into a lineup? Let's see. Let's try. Can we fit Kyle Larson, Ross Chastain? And who else did we say here? We said Ryan Blaney. We said Denny Hamlin. Denny at? Denny Hamlin. And it was Brad Keselowski. Yeah, it only gives you $600 left over, so you got to leave one of them out. Yeah, so then you just kind of go, okay, which one of these? Let's leave Brad out. It gives you 10,800. Now all of a sudden you can take a Justin Haley at 5,600 and an Alfredo starting at 24th at 5,200. You know, how many of these how many lineups are out there going to be just like this? Larson, Chastain, Blaney, Hamlin, Justin Haley, who has 2 Super Speedway wins. Actually, he's got 3 Xfinity Super Speedway wins and a Cup Super Speedway win. Anthony Alfredo, who almost won today's Xfinity race. I mean, starting 27. Now you're using all 50,000, and I do not recommend having a lineup that uses all $50,000. It's absolutely insane to do that. But you could put, I mean, you could switch out a Cody Ware for a Justin Haley and a BJ McLeod. And now you have $700 still left over. And, I mean, that potentially ends up being a pretty good lineup. Now, I know Cody Ware hasn't run at all this year, but the Rick Ware cards have been running pretty good. So, it's going to be interesting. These lineups are going to be, they're going to be pretty tight up front. That's right. Let's see. I think that's where it was. But yeah, I mean, Chris Buescher, 8,500, starting in 8th. I mean, he's got a 20.8 average finish. I don't have any interest in anybody that's starting in the top 10. He starts in 8th and finishes in 9th, and it's a bad day for DraftKings. It's a good day for his race, but that's the crazy part about this is you could easily sit here and watch this race, and Kyle Larson goes and ends up finishing 18th, and as a Larson fan for DraftKings, I'm excited. I think that's great. But for his day, that's probably really crappy for a Kyle Larson. But for DraftKings Worlds, that's really good. Christopher Bell starting in 10th. He's got a 13th place average finish. He finished 15th in the race last fall. Just there's no points here for Christopher Bell. Martin Truex Jr. starting in 6th. 18.4 average finish. He's never won a Super Speedway race before, ever in his career. So no, I don't have any interest in Martin Truex Jr. Tyler Reddick, starting in 18th. We're starting to get some other guys that have potential place differential that you could potentially target as being a little contrarian to your lineups. But I mean, Tyler Reddick has a 25.2 average finish out of the 5 races we're looking at. A 21.3. He's never finished in the top 5 at Talladega, and in these 5 races we're looking at, he's never finished in the top. He didn't finish in the top 10, and he's got a negative 0.7 DraftKings average. So even starting 18th, I really don't like that a whole lot. Alex Bowman starting in 12th, 13.5 average finish. I mean, the thing is, he's now the only Hendricks driver who has not won a race this year. And they're going to probably do everything they can to make sure all 400 cars get into the chase. So, I don't know if this is the race to try to target that one. But, I mean, starting in 12th, Alex Bowman has a potential of having a decent finish. But for DraftKings, I just don't think there's not enough risk reward for Alex Bowman starting in 12th. All right, Ricky Stenhouse Jr., who we know has a 1 win here. He's got 2 wins at Daytona. Is a pretty good Super Speedway racer, but he is awfully risky even starting in 33rd. I don't mind targeting Ricky Stenhouse Jr., but you have to remember Ricky Stenhouse Jr. is extremely aggressive. He's as aggressive as Brad Keselowski is at Super Speedways, and that's why sometimes they win. And it's typically either checkers or wreckers for these guys, both Ricky and Brad. Either they're going to push everybody to the front and pass them with a few laps to go and win the race, or they're going to get up front and stay up front. They're very extremely hard to pass, but they will push and shove all the way to the front, which tends to lead to accidents. So Ricky Stenhouse Jr., I don't mind playing, but the same with Brad. You got to remember that they can be they're kind of bullies when it comes to super speedway racing. Ty Gibbs, 7,500, starting in 15th, has a 30th place average finish over the 4 starts that we're looking at. At Talladega, he's got a 34.3, starting 15th. I mean, yeah, Ty Gibbs could easily go win the race tomorrow, and this could be the one where he finally gets his win. But I'm not sure that there's enough. There is some place differential here. 15th is probably where you start to see, okay, I don't mind taking a little bit, because if they do have a really good day or get that lucky shot at winning, it's worth it. So you can run some Ty Gibbs. Austin Cindric, starting in 2nd. No, he can win the race, and he's not going to make the optimal lineup. Jesse Love won the race today, started outside the pole next to Austin Hill, led laps, and still didn't make the optimal lineup today in the Xfinity Series. Now, that was because a lot of the guys in the back were able to make it up front. I understand that, but chances are that typically happens at super speedways. Austin Dillon starting in 5th. I mean, good qualifying spot for Austin Dillon. Good finish for him last week. Glad to see maybe he's got the bad luck monkey off his back. But starting in 5th at a super speedway for DraftKings, I don't have a whole lot of interest. I'm happy to see that he is doing better, but I don't have any interest for this weekend. Daniel Suarez, I mean, he won the Atlanta race earlier this year, which is a pseudo super speedway style race. He's got an 18.6 average finish. Does not have a top 5 at Talladega. 3 top 10s, but no top 5s. So that kind of makes you go, okay. But starting 25th, if he goes up and finishes 7th, that's a pretty good day. And that's a lot of place differential. So I don't mind some ownership in Daniel Suarez. Eric Jones, don't mind having ownership in Eric Jones. 10.6 average finish for the 5 races we're looking at. Now, no top 5s recently, but 4 top 10s. Okay. Did finish 27th in this race last fall, which was the worst finish he's had out of those 5 races. And his 14 total starts at Talladega, he's got a 17.0. I mean, Eric Jones gets up and finishes 11th. That's going to be real close to being in the optimal, at least in the top 15 in points. Chase Briscoe, don't mind taking a shot on Chase Briscoe. I mean, here's a differentiating person right here who probably will get overlooked a little bit. 6,900, starting 26th. Finished 14th in the fall race last year. He's got a 15th place average finish. I don't mind playing some Chase Briscoe, especially in the Fords. The Fords are super fast at super speedways. So same thing with Noah Gragson. I mean, starting 36, almost have no place to go but up. He's driving a Stewart Haas Ford. They're fast. They've shown good speed. Tune up this car a little bit, hang out in the back, wait for the carnage to happen, and get yourself a good finish. Noah has been running really well at super speedways. He's had some bad luck. Now, is that of his own making? Maybe. But he's also won in the Xfinity Series at super speedways. So starting 36, I definitely don't mind taking some shots on Noah. And at 6,800, that gives you some value. Michael McDowell, congratulations on the pole, but I have absolutely no interest in playing Michael McDowell. Corey LaJoie, starting 31st. I mean, here's another one. Gregson, Gregson's not a bad pivot off of Larson and saves you some money. And like I said, Larson isn't the best at super speedways. And that's self-admitting. He's not great at super speedways. He always gets up close to the top 5. He'll even lead a few laps here and there, but he always seems to find the trouble. Just always seems to find the trouble. It is absolutely pouring in Talladega right now. Corey LaJoie. I mean, here's another good pivot. Starting 31st. I mean, how many times at super speedways have we heard Corey LaJoie's names mentioned running up front? He had a 5th place finish last fall here. I said there's a lot of decent guys that run well at super speedways that are starting towards the back that easily pivot off of Larson. But remember, Larson ends up having a top 10 day. he's going to make the optimal lineup. What are those chances? I think it's 50-50. But if he ends up having a good day and you don't have him, you're not making the optimal lineup. You're not taking the bag home like Family Man did. So I mean, definitely do not fade off of Larson. I think you need to be equal weight with Larson. And then the differentiating part is going to be, do you take a Corey LaJoie with him? And do you take a Noah Gragson with him? Or a Chase Briscoe? Yeah. I think that's where you begin to differentiate. Ryan Preece, starting 11th, starting too far up. Especially with his average finish. He had a finish 9th last fall. Okay, good. But 2 spots doesn't do me any good. I mean, here's another one that'll probably get overlooked. Josh Berry, 6,300. Average finish of 25th. We don't have a whole lot of body of work for Josh Berry other than what he's done in Xfinity, which has been mediocre. It's been okay. But he's running a Stewart-Haas Ford. The Fords are fast on super speedways. Starting 29th, hang out in the back. You know, start that second pack. Finish stage 1, stage 2. You know, if there happens to be some carnage early, you miss that, and now you've got the second stage to come up and win it. I mean, Haley Berry, Haley almost won the race today. Would have been the first female to win an Xfinity race. She's running in 4th on the final restart. She just didn't get the push that she needed to win. Todd Gillen, good on him for starting 3rd. He'll probably lead some laps. Remember, Todd Gillen is the Ford driver with the most laps led so far this year. That's crazy. John Hunter starting in 20th. He finished 7th. He's got an average, finished 7th at Daytona earlier this year. He's got an 8th place average finish at Talladega. Starting in 20th? I mean, that's a decent little pivot. It's not quite as many place differentials as I'd like to see, but that's not a bad pivot. He's probably going to be probably not be very heavily owned. So that's not a bad pivot. Wouldn't mind this pivot. I'm going to have him in a few lineups, but I think there's better options towards the back, but you can be very contrarian and play a John Hunter. I mean, Carson Hocevar starting 35th. Now, his body of work at super speedways has been awful, but I mean, Daytona earlier this year was not his fault. So that hurt him. And he was running the 42 car last year that, I mean, they legitimately were not very good. But starting 35th, you don't really have far to... There's only 3 spots worse than where you're starting. So, I mean, and Carson Hocevar has shown that he has the ability to easily get up and run top 15 and possibly even top 10. So I don't mind taking some chances on Carson Hocevar at 5,800. Zane Smith, starting in 30th, has had success on super speedways, not in the Cup Series, more or less, but he's got a 25th place average finish over those last 2. I'm not sure why. Because these are mostly Daytona. Yeah, it's a Daytona and a Talladega. That's why it's showing only 1 start. But starting 30th. Hang on the back with your Spire Motorsports guys and just wait for the carnage. Justin Haley starting in 27th. Justin Haley's good on super speedways. A 15.6 average finish over the 5 races we're comparing to. At Talladega, he's got a 14.1 average finish. He finished 7th in this race last fall. Now, Justin Haley's not going to hang around 27th. He's going to get to the front. That's just the way he races these races, and he misses the big ones most of the time. For some reason, he's just really good. He's like Denny Hamlin. He's a I'm going to miss the big one whisperer. I don't know. They sniff it out. Shane Van Gisbergen starting in 17th. I mean, he had a good race today, but he doesn't have a whole lot of experience in this Cup car. I mean, what he does have, it does win. He seems like he's going to be somebody to be reckoned with in the next few years. He is showing a lot of maturity at these super speedways. At least he showed a lot of maturity in the Daytona race in Xfinity, the Atlanta race in Xfinity, and again today in the Talladega. So Shane is really, really smart when it comes to racing. And it's not going to be long before we're going to start to see him running well on these 1.5 mile and super speedways too. Daniel Hemrick starting in 19th, maybe a little too far up for what I would really like to see from somebody like Hemrick, but I'm not sure, but anything's possible. So yeah, I mean, this would be an interesting pivot. I don't love this pivot. Harrison Burton, I don't like this pivot either. Starting at 16th, I think he just starting too far up. Anthony Alfredo, this is an interesting pick at 24th. Alfredo almost won the race today, also in Xfinity. He was right there. He led a bunch of laps late in the race. He understands how to do Talladega, and I had to actually make his car because there weren't any pictures of a Dude Wipe 62 car out there. So I think I did okay for just putting numbers on a car and a thing. But either way, Alfredo, I don't mind. I wouldn't mind taking some Alfredo as a nice little pivot, and he probably will get overlooked. I mean, he'll probably get overlooked for somebody like a BJ McLeod. I mean, BJ's kind of being thrown around as a real dark horse for this race tomorrow. 27th place average finish. I mean, I don't mind playing some BJ McLeod, but I just don't know what you fully get with a BJ. The problem is they sometimes have a tendency to have mechanical issues. So this one you got to kind of take with a grain of salt. Cody Ware's back, starting in 34th. I mean, it's not a bad pivot. He's the cheapest guy on the board. And he's starting 34th. I mean, ton of place differential here. His average finish is better than BJ's. And the 15 car and Rick Ware have been running really, really well so far this year. So I don't mind taking the Cody Ware. All right, so guys that I like that I think will be probably heavily owned. Kyle Larson, Ross Chastain, Noah Gragson, Denny Hamlin. All will be probably heavily owned, along with Ryan Blaney, Ricky Stenhouse, BJ McLeod, Eric Jones. I mean, your pivot is kind of in this area here. The Cody Ware, Josh Berry, Brad Kay, Zane Smith, Justin Haley, Anthony Alfredo, John Hunter are all real potentials. And I mean, honestly, I'm just staying away from pretty much most everybody that's starting 15th or better. It's just too risky. So hopefully that gives you guys a plenty of information. We're just a little over an hour. If you've got any questions, Andrew B, they both are looking very high and maybe Gragson is a pivot off of Larson. Yeah, I think I answered that one. Yeah, he potentially. I mean, like I said, I don't mind the Gragson pick, but I mean, where did I say Gragson is starting? 36. For somebody that's driving a Ford Stewart Haas car, he's got 3 other teammates out there. Yeah, I mean, the ceiling's pretty high on him. I mean, he could easily get a top 15, if not a top 10. So I don't mind the Gragson, but I'm also predicting that he's going to be pretty heavily owned. I think probably a really good pivot. Who's my sneaky play? I think Eric Jones may be fairly sneaky. Hocevar could be pretty sneaky too. Don't mind the Suarez play. Josh Berry may be kind of sneaky. Got a shirt on. Josh Berry's probably a pretty sneaky play that not a whole lot of people are going to target. Yeah, I think Josh Berry's might be my favorite sneaky target. He and Eric Jones. Because Ricky Stenhouse Jr. has won Daytona recently. Blaney's won here recently. Eric Jones, Corey LaJoie always he's a media darling, so everybody talks about him. Carson Hocevar could be sneaky also, but Carson has had a tendency to be talked about a lot, and has had pretty decent success at other tracks. Briscoe might be kind of sneaky. I'm not sure Suarez, because he just won Atlanta, would be all that sneaky. I mean, yeah, Suarez is going to be a little bit sneaky because he hasn't been performing super well recently, but he did just win Atlanta. So, and he was in the booth today for the Xfinity race. So that those types of things are things that sometimes kind of get overlooked, especially for the casual player that's playing DFS. Is, they'll sit there and listen to Daniel Suarez all through an Xfinity race, along with a Ryan Blaney today, and think that, oh, well, they're in the booth, they must know how to do this really, really well. Well, guess what? All of these guys on this page know how to do this really, really well. And most of anybody on this page would have a real legitimate shot at winning the Xfinity race for today. So, and the cards are just that equal. It's just going to be who is at the right spot at the right time and who's at the wrong spot at the wrong time. I mean, Zane Smith could be potentially pretty sneaky. I also like Byron. He is on a whole nother level at this moment. I mean, he's on a whole nother level with this next gen car. And starting in 13th, I mean, there's some place differential there. That William Byron goes in. All right, let's look at a William Byron. What is William Byron's ceiling? All right. What did we say William Byron was starting in 13th? All right, so 13th. If he finishes in first, and let's say he leads 20 laps, and let's say he has 5 fast laps. Okay. What does that get us? That gives us 64.25 points. And then you get let's compare him to Ryan Blaney. Ryan Blaney, what did he say? Starting 21st. Let's say Ryan Blaney finishes in second. Let's say he only leads 4 laps and has 5 fast laps. So so this is kind of what we're saying right here. So then, whoops, they both get the same amount of points, 64.25. I didn't even mean to do that. So the guy that starts in 21st, that finishes in second, with only 4 laps led, gets the same amount of points as somebody that starts 13th, finishes first, has to lead 20 laps at 64.25 points. Both are not bad plays. Willie B has the opportunity and the ability to easily win the race tomorrow. Does that kind of help out? Maybe. Yeah. Then okay. So let's look at a Kyle Larson who starts in 38th, makes it to third, doesn't lead any laps, and has 4 fast laps. Outscores him by 13 points. 77.8. That's the place differential. So then you look at a 36th place Noah Gragson has 5 fast laps, doesn't lead a lap, has 74.25, outscores William Byron and Ryan Blaney by 10. It's all place differential. It's just putting the right 6 guys together, and hopefully not having, as Fan found out last week, if he'd been the only one who had that lineup, he would have really hit a bag instead of sharing multiple bags. But yeah, and that's the difference. So then we can even look at all right, Michael McDowell starts first, finishes first. Let's say he even leads 80 laps. He'd have to lead. Let's say that's 80 laps. Let's go to 60 laps. He leads 60 laps. Ryan Blaney beats him by 2 points. By 2 points. So it's 70 laps. He beat the guy who absolutely dominates a race. Beats the guy who finished second, started 21st by half a point. Which one has a better chance of happening? Michael McDowell starting first, finishing first, and leading 70 laps? Not at Talladega. Not happening. Or Ryan Blaney starting 21st, finishing second, and only leading 4 laps. That's more realistic. Now, if Ryan Blaney were starting from the pole, I'd say, yeah, you may have a shot. Mike Waddell started on the front row at Daytona, and that didn't last very long. So, hopefully that answers your guys' questions. It kind of really shows you the power of place differential at a super speedway, just because I like starting lineups with Byron and Blaney and adding some place differential for the last four. So, no, well, Blaney is a place differential driver this week. Somebody that's starting in 20th, and I'd take anything that's going to move 10 place differentials as that's going to move 10 spots as a place differential target. And Blaney's got a lot more upside than that. William Byron's kind of right on the cusp of that. Tyler Reddick's just not good enough at super speedways. Bubba Wallace just hasn't shown. He's pretty good at super speedways. But I would take a William Byron in 13th before I took a Bubba Wallace in 14th. So yeah, out of anybody that's starting in the top 20, I think William Byron's probably the best option. Who's starting? Daniel Hemrick 19th, 18th. There's 17th is Van Gisberging, 16th is who's starting in 16th? Harrison Burton, no. 15th is Ty Gibbs, no. Bubba Wallace in 14th, yeah. William Byron 13th, okay, I could see that one. And now we're just getting to the point where there is no place differential potential. So William Byron probably in the top 20 might be the only person other than maybe Bubba Wallace that I would even think about targeting. So hopefully that answers your question. Let's put those lineups in. Let's see who wins. I would love for one of us to win and take home some money, and we can all brag about it next week on the show. So, but if anybody does, make sure you hit me up in the chat. But on that, it's 11:23 on the East Coast, and I'm gonna go spend a little time with the wife and get up tomorrow and watch some Talladega racing. Hit me up in the chat if you've got any questions, thoughts, or whatever. I'll be more than happy to try to answer them. But either way, good luck tomorrow. Talladega, it's always fun to watch. It's always interesting. It's always a little bit stressful. And don't ever look at your on what you were winning or not winning until 20 minutes after the race is over, because it has a tendency to fluctuate. So just remember that. Even last week, Family Man sent me the message, and even his still fluctuated 20 minutes after the race was over. So just beware. Draftkings does some funny things. NASCAR does some funny things at the end of a race. So I appreciate you guys tuning in. Make sure you hit the like and subscribe button. We'll see everybody next week about 10 o'clock. And if you hit on anything tomorrow, let me know. Thanks, guys. Have a great night. Bye.
Get a good deep breath. Get ready to roll here. Only about one thing tonight, getting the W, so got to be around at the end to do that. Get ready to roll tonight, boys. Let's go have some fun.
Don't get me any more fired up than I already am.
All the way to the checkered. You're fine. Nobody's got to run. Checker time, baby!
Hell yeah!
Proud of you there, man. Good job, pal. Thanks, man. Good job all day.
Great work, my man. Great work. Keep putting yourself in position. We'll win our share, right? We got one back today, brother. Good job.
Great job, guys. Excellent work, my man. Excellent work. Thank you.
Man, that's awesome. Set out with a goal we got it here, bud. Thank you very much.
Really proud of you, man. Drove your butt off tonight. We had the fastest car here, bud.
Probably killed our deal there. Just feel like I gave one away. Yeah, boys. Way to rebound. Great job.
Great job, bud. Really good job. Appreciate you hanging in there with us all weekend.
What a weekend. Good job. Thank you.